So one thing I've been, we went to school together. There's a teacher there that I took a lot lessons with, who I've just have followed because I just love his playing. That's Tim Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I like about Tim's playing, solo, the time to solo playing,
Yep.
is again he also seemed to be, I guess he mentioned something like he never got to the level that he wanted to with regular sweeping.
Mm-hmm.
So he developed that little like
Yep.
2-1-2-1 thing, and he's also able to get more harmonic information in there.
Mm-hmm.
And also to someone like myself, who's attracted to maybe leaps sometimes, you're able to get a good amount of leaps.
Sure.
Kind of within, although you mentioned not wanting to be in a box,
Mm-hmm.
every now and again it's mildly helpful for if you don't have Holdsworth hands
Yeah.
and can't do that on one string.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially if you like to hear.
Yeah. Some nice intervals. Sure.
So you're able to do a lot of intervallic stuff with non-Holdsworth hands,
Mm-hmm.
and nor necessarily the like obvious
Yeah.
string skip thing. And how have you been able to go about that? Because you do a lot of string skipping, seemingly very quick.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say, like, say you were keeping it diatonic
Mm-hmm.
as all hell, and even though you don't do a lot of positions, there's a few where you kind of stayed in here. It was like a combination of a box and a
Yeah,
two box,
yeah,
two and a
yeah.
half box, whatever.
Yeah. So
So-
what? There's basically there's two. As it relates strictly to the technique of this thing, what I do is, if we're talking purely inside, it's mainly around. So I'm working a lot in like tenths, sevenths. Generally, maybe some sixths. I also like lately doing more stuff with fifths and fourths and stuff. But for wider intervals, it's back to that same scale question we were talking about, where I'm essentially like with C. I'm right, just
And
sevens.
you never bothered to hybrid pick any of that?
No, because I'm also like I'm a real like practical dude for just like whatever works.
Right.
I've actually never thought about my picking technique. Like I never like sat down and was like, I never thought about that. I just did whatever needed to be done to get the effect out that I needed.
And, damn it. Good train of thought. It's derailed.
You get it back.
Damn it. So, in that same, in that same thing, Tim mentioned, and actually another classmate of ours, and Prodigy also, Julian Lodge, right? Both him and Tim, a lot of times at school, people get told, don't even play anything until you hear what you play. Blah, blah, blah. Like, if you don't hear anything, just don't even play anything. And,
A lot of silent guitar players in the world.
okay, so
Yeah.
right, because Tim took a lot of that pressure off my back when I was like, you've got to, like, who's hearing a bebop thing and hearing all of that?
None. No one.
Uh,
Zero people.
and he mentioned like, oh well, something like that you can hear no problem. Whatever, something slower, something maybe within 1 or 2 octaves, as opposed to hearing.
Sure. Yeah. Intervallic stuff gets harder and harder to hear the wider it is, obviously.
Sure. And also, and then the faster it gets, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a sheet.
So, I guess you're kind of already answering it, but you've mentioned a few times that you hear everything you play, even that crazy fast stuff?
I think so we're getting, so as we talked about earlier, that sort of hierarchy, those bricks of importance, right? With harmony, melody, rhythm being the traditional thing, but in reality for me it's rhythm, melody, harmony. And so what I hear is not so much the literal notes, right? But more the phrasing that I want them to be in. So if we're in C, I might not hear I might not literally hear that, but I will hear, something like that, right? So So if I'm practicing enough.
So that would be more or less what you heard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, when you're getting into higher speeds, it's always going to be a matter of approximation because we're not like, AI. It's always going to be a little bit of that. And then
it seemed like there was this when it gets told, I suppose a lot of the times to me at a college level, but every now and again in interviews with whoever,
right.
It is very black and white. Like
yeah, because
it is. You hear everything being like
that allows professors to have this this godlike position over you, is that they can do that. When anyone who's ever been to music school knows that like 40% of the professors are great, 60% of them are like tenure, just chilling. So a lot of those guys can't do even half the shit they're telling you to do. Again, my opinion. Plenty of people would disagree with that, but and literally any person that comes up to you and says they can hear every single note they're going to play before they play it is just a fucking liar. Because if we're talking,
you're following an instinct, or you're hearing of the rhythm and you're hearing of shapes.
Yeah, I mean, it's colors more for me, so it's more tensions. I guess.
Okay.
Right. It's
more
like,
and I'm in shapes like ascending, and then D, and then it's going to go down in this kind of block form.
Yeah, but that in colors too. So if we're like in the diatonic thing, I know that I want to hang on a fourth, stay up, don't. I want to play with that motif. Whatever, right? So it's not so much like I heard all of that, otherwise I wouldn't have played it. And also, like, the best way to know
in that scenario would be every single note.
Yeah, but we're getting a subjective question on what hearing is, right?
Right. Is normally, at least how I've heard it, it is
literal
not
notes.
Subjective. It's literally I heard it. Oh, really? Every single.
No. I think what you hear, big capital H, major air quotes, is you hear tension and release, right? You hear resolution and lack thereof.
Right.
And from playing an instrument for fucking 30 years, you learn how to do those things. And so you can say, yes, I'm hearing those notes, but you're not literally hearing that succession of notes. You're hearing the result.
To more literal people, I think they would need an asterisk.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it. I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, music teaching needs lots of asterisks. You're not literally hearing the result because a lot of these things, a lot of professors will say stuff willy-nilly like that, and leave.
Be like, oh,
19-year-old minds with just this fucking, catastrophic insecurities when they go to the practice shed because they're like, man, I'm not hearing every note, and I need to hear every note, so I'm going to shed more so I can hear every, and it's like, dude, no one's hearing it. Like, what do you, it's just craziness.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt at 19, being like, oh my God.
Totally. Like, all these great players are actually hearing
every one of you are a genius? Like,
no, man, no.
And then,
because in the way you know that people aren't exclusively, truly hearing and improvising every note is because what I just did there, I went like that. That's how you know somebody's improvising, really, because you're going to have frequent / semi-frequent mistakes.
Yeah.
If I'm truly trying to get what's in my head onto an instrument in the spur of the moment, there's no chance I'm 100% successful at doing that.
Right.
No way. So when you find players who don't do that, just most players, there's usually a ratio of like, I know that works, I know this works. In between is like a lot of stuff that I'm messing around with and trying. But there's always these touchstones, man. You don't go on a fucking hike without a map. I mean, you get lost and get eaten by wolves or whatever.
Unless you have great desert training.
Yeah, sure. But I had maps. I still use maps. You need to know the direction. This is why I love Wayne Shorter so much, right? Because he's definitely one of the pure improvisers of like in this kind of really canonical school of improvisation. He's definitely one of the better dudes. But you can still hear things. He's still got things he does that kind of grounds the band together. That does and he's super free, but he still has this shape he's kept in mind. And even if you're saying like you're thinking of a shape beforehand, you're still not truly improvising because you've already conceptualized it to the point of having a shape.
Right.
So this like purity question is dumb. Like if you're not really, you have to really like 1, 2, 3, go, and just like fuck it and just go.
Because see, someone like myself who started 13 years after you in playing, And so basically was playing for like all of a year and then went to Berkeley.
That's rough.
Yeah. Like it seemed like, oh, this is where the truth is.
Sure,
and
man.
it's being told very matter-of-factly, and I'm not it.
I think there's not enough analysis done of what music teachers and professors are saying.
Saying, or like, to be fair, if they're trying to keep the magic about them or into their own head,
that's
being like, okay, that's fair, but can you ease this kind of
tell me
brain?
the truth?
Whatever.
Exactly.
Another one that would be, so all these things you've played have been, or a lot of things you've played have been really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, a lot of them are in a similar technique.
Sure.
You're not like randomly tapping.
No.
But I guess, although you've been playing for a very, very long time, how much do you, like, I'm sure that sometimes in practice, you're like practicing with a goal to like, all right, I got to do this and I got to attain this new thing and assimilate it, whatever, or have it become comfortable. And it's not every day of, especially like 30 years, but even for me, like 15 or whatever it is, 14 years, still not every day amount.
You're actively practicing like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So how often do you practice like that? How often do you do whatever? Do you just not play, or do you? Because I imagine you have to maintain that.
Yeah, I play every day for sure.
Yeah.
Or I try to. I mean, I have a kid now, and like the hours have definitely decreased the past year or so. But
how many hours do you have to do to maintain what that is?
I mean, my physical ability to play the guitar is so ingrained. I think now that I like an hour would do it. Usually, just maintenance.
An hour of maintenance makes sense.
Yeah.
Because even if it's not in, I think after a certain amount of years, it's probably ingrained for
totally,
anyone. Yeah.
Totally. But I mean, my favorite way to practice is just to play the guitar, just to play. Without a metronome, just play the guitar. I'll do that for like an hour, 2 hours, just pure, whether it's tonal, whether it's non-tonal, or just play. And then maybe I'll like throw on the metronome on like some, chaotically obscene tempo, and then do that for like an hour. And, just purely look at the effect of, it's like, ding, 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 ding. Whatever, I'm not warmed up, but and I'll just do that for an hour. So
at that point you're at 3 hours.
Yeah.
All right, so no small amount of time.
No, I mean but that seems small to me because I'm used to doing like to 8.
Sure.
Or more,
Well, 3 hours is enough for the muscles to like whatever retain and blah blah blah.
I still have the desire of practicing the level that I practiced when I was younger, and I like an adult human can't play 8 hours a day usually.
Yeah, because I'll have that desire every now and again too, being like, I guess Saturday I could probably practice for 12 hours, and then like anything comes up.
Yeah, sure, because you're an adult, man. You're in the fucking world. You got to do it, you know? I mean, man, like my current life right now is you know, I'm working in 45-minute blocks, you know? Like, he's taking a nap. Okay. You know, like shed for a while, and it's like the monitors, I'm like I watch the monitor while I'm practicing, you know? And then he's up, and it's like, fuck, okay, cool. You know, it's, you know, this is how it is. Or my wife will help him. It's just crying, and we're sleep training him right now. And yes, it's just, you know, life will always get in the way of shedding. But I think that's also like, I look at any kind of adverse situation. By adverse, I don't mean negative. I mean like adversity. To come into this that presents itself as an opportunity to be different and or better, not as like a oh man, now I got to deal with this shit kind of thing. So I feel like, you know, and like I can still play fast and I practice it and all that stuff, but I would be totally content to never play a 30-second note ever again as long as I live. I feel like I've made plenty of statements with that aesthetic.
Sure.
And so if practicing less actually makes me less able to do that, I'm actually fine with that. You know, I'm kind of fine to lose the muscles, so to speak. You know, I'm searching for things that are not that anyway right now, and would like to be able to communicate awe and inspiration to people without resorting to that kind of like, look how big and strong I am kind of stuff.
Also, I feel like your melodies might be a bit more out of the norm for people, and playing it fast, while that is awesome, it is probably harder to digest. That's why people are coming like, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
They're all a billion notes.
Sure.
Because I remember I had that conversation with you when you were talking about like, over like a C major, I would play this one thing. And then basically I spent the week finding out that what you meant was you'll play any note ever, whenever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, damn it. Like,
yeah. Pretty much.
And, you know, it was like 3 days of me being like, oh, so he would normally do, because I suppose to someone who didn't grow up either playing at 4 or with, who didn't grow up playing at 4 or with Jazz Dad or with whatever, and who pretty quickly went into the college system.
Right.
I guess I was like, it was very much like, I gotta get good like now.
Yeah, you're prime. You're fresh meat, man. That's like prime. That's what they want. They want those guys who have like no past indoctrination. Just like, oh, we can.
Ironically, though, I share your temperament in that people probably think you're a skeptic or cynic.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've been called that, and also there's many lessons where it was like, what is your problem, Elliot? And I'd be like, oh, you just played 3 licks. I don't want to be that guy. That's all I know, is I don't want to be that guy, but I need to get really good. So at the very least, I need to make my own ways to get better.
Right. I mean, that's really the impulse. If everybody had that impulse, we wouldn't be making this video. I wouldn't even be here with you. Because everybody would just be like on their own path and like digging it and figuring things out for themselves, and, you know.
My appreciation would be, I feel like that would kind of like Thanos snap half the music industry away.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
But whatever. Again, not for everybody. It's everybody.
Right.
But so for someone who had to like, who at least it's hard to shake that instinct. Your instinct is, I'm going to listen to whatever it is I do because I grew up in this thing. Mine is, I need to make a system so I can digest this.
Mm-hmm.
How would... It's mildly tough because that's my system, your system's your system. I'd like to make a system out of what you do. How would you suggest going about, other than like, I don't know, listen to contemporary classical and then play guitar?
I mean...
I feel like most people also operate with a system. They learned from some kind of system, even if they started at like 9.
Right.
They played Hell's Bells for 9 years.
Sure. Yeah. I think like... It's hard to say, well, and this is kind of what I was saying about, you know, Schofield or like any player too. It's hard to want to learn from someone's ability to be unlike others while also wanting to emulate that in some way.
To emulate, so...
or even take something from it, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what...
But say Stevie Ray sounded an awful lot like Albert King.
Yeah, totally, which is like a better version, for sure, but yeah.
Hendrix sounded an awful lot like Otis Redding in certain scenarios.
Totally.
So you can still see where like there's a bit of personal where they individualize whatever they
like
learn.
meld, yeah, for sure.
But then there's the assimilate, like you're saying, like wanting to come out with an album that's from a place.
Right.
They definitely came from a place.
Definitely.
Stevie Ray seemingly only listened to blues.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, literally, yeah.
And then someone like other guitar hero, Vi, seemed to listen to a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and then
but he has his like thing.
Totally.
So, but there's no mistaking that it's a rock background.
Definitely, yeah.
Some high output pickups. But so where would you suggest someone to, like I'm sure even Schofield, where would you suggest someone to start with this to assimilate and then do their own, like they'll do their own thing, but where to start to assimilate that?
I guess like in terms of like my playing and coming from my perspective, the first thing would be the harmonic stuff. So because once you've elevated and or alleviated the need to it's I'm a real like mental real estate kind of guy, right? So like, and we were talking about this earlier about gear and stuff like that, the more things that are going to occupy mental real estate for me are negatives that aren't musical, like strictly musically related, right? And so harmony and this obsession with chord progression and changes and scales and correct notes and all that stuff is a major taker upper. There you go. Good. Of mental real estate. It takes up so much space, and it should take some space because you need to know what fucking key you're in and like what you're playing, what the correct notes are, and all that. But you there's a tendency to really hyper over focus on this stuff, like way too much. And I think if there was one piece of advice I'd give someone to kind of have a similar path that I had in terms of realizations about music and how to be more original through that, it would be to first liberate oneself from this harmonic thing, and realize that it's a tool like any. It isn't this overlord where it's always just looking and eyeing you and this big brother thing with harmony. It's not that at all. It's just one element. It's a tool to use in any given situation. And once I've seen some, it's also like, man, it's years we're talking here, right? I mean,
well, none of this seems like you're gonna get it over a weekend. Definitely
not. No, it's because it's philosophical. Half of it is not even musical. It's an outlook thing, right? I mean, what makes somebody get shot in the leg and go like, holy shit, my life's over. Oh my god. Only one guy goes like, oh, this really hurts, but I'm gonna work it out. I'm gonna figure this out.
Right.
Those are just outlooks. The two people are both shot in the leg. The experience is the same. They're just choosing to interpret it, two different ways.
And so if I was to take, though, say Stevie Ray's playing is philosophical, Schofield's playing is philosophical, and etc. You could break down Stevie's philosophical approach to heavy right hand, etc. You can break down Schofield's approach to the point where, again, you can copy it because you're like, oh, his philosophical approach is the lean back, blah blah blah,
laid
pick
back,
near the thing, and
the bridge pickup,
right?
Yeah.
How would you, if you could, if it doesn't like ruin the magic for you, like boil down your philosophies into like feel the time this way?
Yeah, I would say so. First, probably one of the major things for me would be energy level. I think that's probably one of the bigger things. Is that I tend to focus on transmission of energy more than I would think the average player would do. I'm more interested in how something's being perceived rather than what it is that's being perceived. It's what we were talking about, harmony and scales and all that. And that's why I like these more minimal musics that are based more on now especially that are like blues and country and music like that are based on content transmission and not like what it is but how it's being taken in. So energy would be a big part of that. Intensity, like probably a little aggression. I mean, I think I'm probably a little bit rougher than probably the average creative music guitar player, whatever the fuck that means. I mean, a lot of the guys in this scene come from pretty similar backgrounds, and a lot of them are like East Coast, like rather affluent, kind of intellectual backgrounds, with their parents like professors, or you see a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm from Arizona, man. I'm from like the dirt. My parents are they're working class people. I'm like, I ride dirt bikes and horses and stuff. That's my background, right? So I don't have this like effete sort of cute way of looking at art or music. To me, it's like, this shit is to be played and played strongly and to be transmitted strongly and be giving people like, I don't think of anything as like a precious academic pursuit, at all, because it's not, man. I mean, like, school's boring. School was the least fun I've had playing music. It was fun to be at Berkeley and have those connections and be there, and like, the professors were incredible, but like, no one's like stoked playing in the Uchida building for I mean, that's not like, no one's like, wow, man, that was great. And if you are, you haven't had experiences beyond that to like be able to gauge them from, because once you played like in a bar, people are like sweating, they're digging you so hard. That's why you're engaged in this process, right? And so those are the kind of reactions that I want. I want people to be actually into what I'm doing in the moment, right there at that moment. And I found that transmitting that requires you also be engaged in that. You need to be willing to give everything, right? Like sweat, blood, pain. You need to be willing to give that stuff. I'm not a collared shirt and an L5, and like an air conditioned room kind of guy. And a lot of people are. No judgment. Not saying that negatively or to be cutesy or whatever.
No, and that has its like that has a sound, and that's
absolutely
totally cool.
Yeah. And so I think if you couple that with the fact that I do know about all these harmonic vehicles, that I do explore things differently than others do, and I think maybe that's the meld to strive for, is the juxtaposition of the two things. Which you don't often see. Usually you get, it's like anything, man. If I've chosen to speak a language, it's like, let's use music as a language, which is often done. I could make the lexiconical choice to espouse every possible word that I've ever collated into my brain and do it with an accent that made me sound very refined and special. But I don't fucking care about any of that bullshit. I'm me. This is what I do. Just because I have a vocabulary and I have a lexicon doesn't mean that I feel the need to use it all the time. I have just as much an affinity with stupid words, like whatever, profanity or whatever it is, and using that analogy as with crude or crass musical stuff like bending and distortion and like aggression and these kind of like crass or musical things that intellectual music tends to go like, ooh, that's too real again. No. Right. And I use these words when I feel the need to use them, when they work in a sentence, right? I mean, like, if we're going to go totally with the language analogy, like, I'm a big fan of Cormac McCarthy and writers like that who have a tremendous vocabulary, right? But use this vocabulary in a way to where whenever a word that is outside the normal sort of, colloquial usage is used, it cuts you in the face. I mean, you're gutted by it because it's so perfectly used, right? As opposed to like, some Victorian novel where you're just getting utterly, you're swimming in adjectives and adverbs and you're ready to like, pass out from it, right? I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. And I think if there's anything that someone could take from my playing, it would be, I can be both powerful, aggressive, forceful, intense, engaged. I mean, man of bullshit that I deal with for facial expressions. I mean, like, it's just like, man, I'm willing to invest in the moment to the extent to where I don't even, I lose myself in it. And I don't even give a shit if you have a problem with that. And like the willingness to do something like that, the willingness to like fully give yourself over to the moment, but also doing that in a context where you have the knowledge and ability with this more creative stuff to play some things that are kind of outside of the box. I mean, I wish more students heard shit like that. Because it does tend to be really canonical, like you said, it's very, we're here in school now and everything's this is right and this is wrong, this is black, this is white, and this is how we do things, this is how we don't do things, this is correct, this is, man. I mean, like, when I played the commencement concert for Berkeley when I was graduating, Manhattan Transfer was being, acknowledged, and they had me play guitar in the band. I'm like, you guys are picking the wrong dude. Why would you, like, a jazz a cappella group? I mean, like, and I had a solo. It was like whatever, How High the Moon or some thing. It was like totally like majorly arranged, and it was tons of hits, like all this sort of stuff. And so I'm taking my solo. I just landed on a flat 9 on a major chord for like 2 bars, because like, man, what's the point otherwise? Like every solo I could possibly think of in that situation was a solo I'd heard before. because the kind of music is so specific, right?
Yeah.
And I just, I bring this story up only to illustrate the fact that, like, this is not some new thing. Like, I'm not willing to be this confident because I'm now 33 and have, like, a place in the world in music, and, like, I have this, like, thing. I was a 19-year-old punk. I was still willing to do this in front of, like, 4 known jazz singers, and it's also, man, like, yeah, that coupled with the fact that, like, I've met and played with a lot of great musicians, and not a single one of them do I, like, truly think is, like, incredible, I don't have hero worship. I don't have this gene. I just don't possess this. I think that I'm equal to all of them, or soon to be. I don't have this, like, oh my god, I can't believe I just met you.
I could never reach.
Don't have that. Don't have that at all. I think because of that, I don't feel like I have. I don't have like a reverential gene, really.
Okay, so that may have been what I was referencing earlier in terms of sentimental. In terms of being like, I like being able to do that.
Yeah, I don't. I like it. For sure. I mean, I respect it. Respect is different. Like, I certainly respect them, but I don't look at anyone's playing and think you're too high for me to reach or surpass, or even not even in a competitive sense. But like, what you play isn't so sacrosanct that I can't play something that's going to destroy it on purpose. Like, I there's a little bit of like a punk attitude, I think.
Sure.
Which you don't see a lot in jazz, or you don't see a lot in a lot of things these days. That I think is, this is the fuel for, this is the spark, man. And I guess that would be that if I wish more young players had that, man. I really do. Like, I see a lot of young players coming out these days are just, we live in like a really sterile time, I think. Not a lot of, I think we've gotten really used to like clean lines and 90-degree angles, and we're all really used to this kind of world where like perfection is so commonplace now that it's like, you go on your phone, you can order fucking food to your door, and you can I was watching this stand-up thing last night, I forgot who it was, and this guy was like, yeah, now you can literally go on Amazon and order a banana, a shark's fin, and like a lug nut, and it's at your house the next day. It's like, what world is that? That's obscene. It would take you 6 months to find those 3 things if you were lucky, not even 15 years ago. Mainly the shark's fin. And I think like there's not a lot of rebellion really happening right now in terms of like a lot of genre happening. I think that's how it's being interpreted now. I see a lot of people thinking that they're like being new by just going like, ooh, no one's thought of this, and just combining genres together. Like, that's the innovation thing, and it's not, because it's still just 2 things together. Like, if I wanted to make a soup, I know that like there are soup ingredients that work. So if I were to take a non-soup ingredient like, let's say, lime zest, right? And I put it in there and it worked, I'm not a genius for having thought about that. I just was willing to make a risk, and it worked. Now, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to take soup as an idea and change it. I'm not going to use any stock ingredients. I'm not going to use carrots or onions or anything. Fuck all that. That's what I would like to see more of. Like, seeing conventions that exist and saying, I acknowledge them, I respect them, I'm willing to
move forward
or just to disregard them.
Sure. Disregard would be what you've done before, coming from that place, though.
Totally.
Moving forward.
Well, yeah, I think that's the nuance, right? Is you can be respectful. Like, I deeply love so many things, but especially blues and classic rock, and I love fucking Coltrane so much, and Sonny Rollins especially. Like, Sonny Rollins is my boy. But I'm never gonna go near that stuff. I'm not gonna ever record a record where I play Night as a Thousand Eyes, or I'm never gonna go near that stuff, right? Again, because they wouldn't. Sonny went on a bridge, man. He practiced on a bridge for like a year and a half because he wasn't happy with his playing. Every night, just like was out of the scene.
Yeah. And
if those are the guys you respect, you can't be somebody who's like playing their shit.
No.
And if a player ever heard me and was inspired to do anything, I would hope it would be that, at least. Say, like, what I get from this guy is the ability that, like, he is willing to take any risk imaginable, willing to do seemingly ridiculous like illogical things career-wise for what he's seeking for, and is it holds no shackles regarding reverence that he won't just say, fuck it, I'm gonna do my own thing, whatever. Even if they never listened to one record of mine. Like even if it wasn't about the music, it was more about the thing, you know. I would just love to see more of that. You know, a lot of conformity going around these days.
So, I guess last one to piggyback on that before my kidneys explode.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier how at least I saw a mild kindred spirit in terms of temperament, because I've been called whatever negative thing.
Sure.
But I don't see how you are as negative, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Solely because I'm like, oh, that thing.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, sure.
How would you say? I suppose explain yourself. So like, you might use harsh, dividing, aggressive terms, and then go like, man, I want to see someone just fuck everything up. Also, I really appreciate the tradition.
Yeah, sure.
At what point, at least the way I view why people call me cynical is because if I see something, I'll be like, oh, that's what that is. Right. Every now and again, people are like, what are you talking about? Yeah. It's something else. That's more superficially positive, I find.
Right.
What about you led you to a more aggressive, more like...
I mean, yeah, I think that is a temperamental question. That is, I think maybe you're just born with that, you know. Like my mom has been asking me that question since I was a kid. Like, what the fuck? Why are you? Why, let's just have Thanksgiving. And I'm like, it's not even a real holiday. It's like you know, if anything, we should be celebrating the reverse. We should be like, you know, going to, you know, reservations and giving donations or something. Like this is a crazy holiday to be celebrating. And you know, when you're 10, your mom's like, God, what's this kid gonna be like when he's an adult? This is like way too much. And it's, I mean,
because to some people it becomes off like you don't respect,
right,
until they hear the entire sentence you've been saying.
Sure.
And they're like, oh, he did, like...
Right. Well, I think because reverence is, musically speaking, right? Because we're talking about an art form of music, so we're talking about something that has to be, by definition, gradually, progressively evolved in order to live and to breathe, right? Or we're talking about a museum thing, which is totally valid. Like, I mean, it's a friend of mine from college went to NEC. She's a world-renowned Baroque opera singer. She just does like Mozart operas, and she's phenomenal. But like that's museum stuff, right? So, and it's not invalid due to that fact, but it's no one's like, you know, looking to it for the cutting edge of where musical thought is going. And there's you can respect something and even love it, actually, and still see the need for, in order for you to place yourself in the chronological line of where that art exists, you also have to do what the person you're respecting has done, which is say, I need to do something new here, right? So I don't think, like, let's use Stevie as an example again, right? He loved Albert King, but he didn't love him so much he didn't want to sound better than him. He was like, I love Albert King, but like, I'm going to fucking take this to the next level.
Right, it wasn't a tribute.
Do better to this. Yeah, exactly. And that's why he is who he is. So if someone listens to that or listens to fucking anything, you would want to listen to that and say, wow, I love those guys. Like, that is I love Pink Floyd, right? Like, just love them. Great band. I have since I was a kid. It's one of my favorite, like, all-time favorite bands. It's just great to, like, put on one of their records, just vibe out. Like, it's incredible. Like, David Gilmour is a wonderful guitar player. It's all great stuff. But there's no world in which I would ever conceive the possibility of putting a band together that was even remotely like that. Because they were groundbreaking. And to truly revere something is to revere it to the extent to where you would want to imitate the very thing that it was. You know, it goes back to this whole playing thing we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Like, if you revere a group or an artist or whatever, you have to also revere their ability to have differentiated themselves from the pack, which is also then would be your responsibility in wanting to move on beyond them, right? And that to me has always seemed. I mean, I have conversations when I remember a conversation with my buddy Paul, who's one of my best friends, great drummer. He and I went to school together in LA before I was at Berkeley, and I used to have conversations with him where I'm like, man, you know, I don't understand why someone could like everything about a band or a player except for the fact that the best thing they could do to honor that band and or player is never sound anything like them. You know, that would be the best honor you could possibly give a group or an artist, would be to say, I will do absolutely nothing like you. You know, barring any of these like really foundational sort of idiomatic cultural things.
Sure.
Like if you're a guitar player, you're going to play some fucking blues at some point. There's no way around it, right? And that's so macro that's free of any individual contribution, and just as like that's a cultural thing, right? If you grew up in the Blue Hills, Kentucky, and you have an acoustic guitar, you're going to play some bluegrass shit. Like, that's period. Whether you're in Punch Brothers or you're the Carter Family, those guys are playing. There's some similar vocabulary going on in there, right? So that's I would love to see that taught more, because that isn't I think maybe 1 in 1,000 people might have that thought like organically, but it takes a teacher going like, hey man, what do you like about X? Oh, I love the blah, 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 blah. Cool. So then you should do. But what's the best thing about that band? What's the best thing about Zeppelin? What's the best thing about Floyd? Or what's the best thing about even some newer shit like Aphex Twin or whatever? What's the best thing about this stuff? Well, because it's like original. That's always going to be the best thing about any given band, because there are so few acts in the modern music marketplace that are clones of other bands. If there's one thing that the music industry does really well, except for like true pop, like you'll forget their name in a week backs, but the ones that kind of rise above the cream, rise above the fat or whatever, is they manage to be different. That's the main gig, Say something different, still be good, but be new. You're kind of in. That's the main criteria. So why that isn't done more is mind blowing to me. And I would just that's what I'm always trying to drive home to people. Like when we've been playing and talking about music or whatever, I'm always just saying like what is you got to find where you are, where you at, where you. And the best way to know that is to take away all the edifice. You got to get rid of all this shit. And whether that's scales or boxes or modes or ways you've been thinking about before, like in order to strip all this stuff away, a lot of that is genre oriented modalities that you also have to get out of there. Like the way you play a note is also a huge part of how you play, and the way you play has a lot to do with the things you listened to in the past, things you're influenced by, all that sort of stuff, right? Yeah, so I mean, it's essentially it comes down to a different kind of philosophy, thinking about things musically, but one where I think you can mutually respect something and also want to see it made obsolete, or at least see it improved upon in a non-competitive way. Right, like sure. Albert King and Stevie played gigs together. They loved each other. Albert King wasn't like, motherfucker, you upped me. How could you? Like, it wasn't like that. It was like, no man, I took your thing and I was inspired to do more with it, and for whatever universally cosmic reason, I have better hand-eye dexterity, and I was willing to practice more than you were, and that's just like how it is,
Sure.
And I would like to see more of that. But I think we're in the genre fusion period right now, where it's like in lieu of that, you just go like, I'm a really good jazz player and I'm a really good funk player, and let's put this band together where we do like funky hit stuff, which is kind of like fusion, but kind of like, and that's what people do. Yeah. People like it, so again, people dig it. Don't stop doing it. But it does lack. I just would like to see more artists just not give a fuck, man. That's what I really miss from a lot of groups. Just like, man, give me all you got. I want you to go home like with your fingers hurting. Like, hurting and drained, man. When I finish gigs, I'm fucking hammered. Truly drained, man. Truly, truly drained. Especially if it's like a rock gig or a gig where it's like a high intensity gig. It's like I went to the gym for 3 hours. I'm fully wasted. And I'm like sore the next day, and my like legs hurt, and like, it's full on thing.
How do you do a tour then?
It's grueling, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's like, oh, it's just hard.
Or I usually do like a light intensity jog before a gig, like a 45-minute like really light, just kind of get the blood flowing kind of thing. Because some tour I was doing, and I was I had like one of those stupid fitness things that I no longer use because they're dumb, but and I was taking like, I was burning like thousands of calories based on heart rate, and so like it's just that's. I'm not going to give anything other than 200%, because not because it isn't like some sort of like altruistic, I love the audience, they deserve my all kind of thing. It's I truly can't play a show. If Andy were to walk in here now and we would get a bass player and you just tell me to take a solo, I would do the same thing. I'd be sweating by the end of it. I physically can't do it. I'm incapable of not trying to trying to get past whatever stuff I'd done before. So I would love to see people trying that more, man. I think we'd have a more fertile, musical environment. We'd have a definitely more honest musical environment. Authenticity gets lost when you're unwilling to look bad, unwilling to look vulnerable, or like, well, if I make that weird face, they might think that like I'm, it's like, dude, fuck them. They're here for you, man. They're here to listen to you.
Right.
Show them why they came. Show them why it isn't weird because it's making better music than they've heard. Like prove these things, There's so much of this like need to please thing, which is like it's so anti-music, man. Like the community that I grew up in and people that I was around then, like these are musicians, man. These people that don't give a fuck about authority. Like this is the community. This is what we come from, like a long line of people who are like scorned and hated for the majority of civilization. So the fact that we're like now it's so like pleasy and so like corporate. It's gross, man. It's gross. It'll come back. It always does. It always happens in these waves. You get these like calcified, goofy times that are then like grunge came after the '80s, and you have it always pendulum swings like that because that's just how we roll. But yeah, That's why I listen to a lot of older music now because I'm looking for that authenticity. I don't get it in newer stuff.
Right.
It's hard to find. It does exist, but it's definitely outside of like the. It's definitely not in jazz. I mean, I don't listen to jazz at all anymore because I don't. I've heard it all before. I've heard the alto sax playing the higher register part against the piano, which is playing 3 against 4, and the drums were playing kind of like out of time, sort of swirly stuff. And I've heard it all. It's a truly moribund genre. It's just like where's it going, man? And if where it's going is into hip hop, then it just becomes hip hop. That's cool. But that's the problem with jazz is everyone's always trying to fuse it with stuff to help it grow. But then it just becomes a new thing. And jazz is a music of a time and place. It is a post-war American music. And I think the healthiest thing we can do for the genre is to realize that that's where it exists and to put it where it exists, like Baroque music. Which is essentially what Wynton Marsalis has done. He said, this is what it is. This is the thing that it epitomizes. I'm going to put it in this place, and that's where it belongs. I don't support that music as in terms of like calling it jazz, but I support the philosophy behind that. It's essentially saying this is a time and place music, man. This is Jackson Pollock and Oppenheimer and fucking the Industrial War Complex, and like this is a whole world created this kind of improvised art, right? And I'm talking about the apex of the time, because of course it came before with Louis and everything, and that's all different. Also, I would, I'm sure plenty of artists would argue with me on this, but I would even dispute some of the labeling of the stuff. Like to me, Louis is blues, is chromatic blues, right? It's heavily swung, but that's bluesy as shit. I mean, I love Louis Armstrong also, like deeply love him. And I think jazz, as we know it, kind of came to the fore in the bebop era. I feel like the modern world thinks of jazz, they think of Charlie Parker, Train, Miles. That's what they think of, and that era of it. I mean, not to mention Dixieland is fully irrelevant. Beautiful music, just like Mozart is beautiful, but I'm not going to say Mozart's relevant because it isn't. It's fully not. I mean, it's written in the 1700s. That period is so indicative of a time and place that you can't possibly argue that it's valid at any time. You can't. It's so specific to that moment in time. And that's why it's so hard to make relevant now. Because people don't improvise. What the fuck? What are you talking about? I want to listen to a song, man. Tell me a story. Because that's jazz had a weird moment where it was able to kind of transcend the rules of the game, which are we're around a campfire. It's the end of the day. I want to hear some music. I want to hear a story. And if you can give me that powerfully and emotionally, cool. But I need those things because those are the things we've always done since we were hunting fucking buffalo or water or gazelle or whatever the hell. That's the moment. No one sat around saying like, yeah, knock me out with 15 minutes of instrumental music.
Okay.
Didn't happen, man. So I kind of laugh at these like, it's jazz, but now it's like hip hop, or it's like this, or it's that, and it's always has this jazz. It's like, man, the reason why it doesn't go to the next level is because you refuse not to play a 2-minute solo. Just stop doing that. Take 2 choruses, if that, call it a day. But then if you do that, what have you created? You've created a non-genre. You've transcended. You're no longer playing jazz. Now you're playing hip hop with jazz elements, or you're playing rock with jazz elements. You're no longer playing jazz. Jazz is it has to exist in that paradigm. a paradigm which is inherently irrelevant. So that's why I don't really listen to it anymore, because it has nothing new to say to me, as to where, because the problem with focusing on things that are in the moment is they tend to not focus on things that are universal, right? So the reason why I love country and blues and things like this is because they focus on universal musical foundational concepts. And any jazz purist is going to tell me that, yes, jazz focuses on blues and swing and rhythm, and that's all true. But jazz primarily focuses on the now. That's what improvisation is, right? It's this moment, this exact moment. And when you're doing that, you're not paying as much heed to structures, right, shall we say. And those are the structures of the things that people respond to.
Familiarity, right, of any kind.
Sure, call what you will, or whatever. Yeah. And I think there's something almost profound beyond the ability to just, randomly just kind of let your creative mind speak. There's something even more profound with taking something that is within a framework and finding new ways to move people with it. That's way harder. Much, much harder, man. And saying like, okay, I have all the harmony in the world and infinite freedom to use it. Just sit there and let me do my thing. As opposed to, okay, you have expectations, I have expectations, I want to move you in a new way, you have things you want, but you're willing to let me kind of go a little bit to we can kind of mess with it. Where's the line where we can both have a transcendent experience here? Much harder. Much, much harder. And that's why people don't listen to it for a reason. There's no like national campaign against jazz. It just doesn't hit people.
Yeah.
Simple as that, man.
Well, that'll depress any jazz department.
But people need to be saying this.
No, I know.
They do. Because like jazz departments should be looked at like classical departments are in colleges, right? No one's training oboists at Cornell to go be anything other than tenured oboists in symphonies and or teachers.
Right.
So that's what jazz departments were, saying, okay, you're either going to get a doctorate and teach, or you're going to work in some orchestra as the third trombone. Totally different. These people are training musicians with the intention of saying, you're going to go out in the world and play this music and succeed at it. That's the fallacy, because you're not going to. It's impossible. It's 1% of the recorded industry market. It represents 1% of the album sales per year.
Yeah.
So, no chance, But that also is like, that doesn't mean that you can't, you can play music that is jazz influenced. Everything I play, if I tried, I wouldn't play like straight anything. No. I'm too influenced by this music to ever do that. But I can play all kinds of music that would also never be called jazz. So you can let the essence of music influence you and move you, but without saying like, that's all about transcending this.
Yeah.
This rule-based shit of like, well, I can't do that. That's not real. That blah blah blah. It's all the same bullshit, man. So let the manifesto begin.